My name is Will Hinton. I'm with Systems Evolution Incorporated, SEI. I am talking today about Drupal DevOps is not just for experts. There are some DrupalCamp and DrupalCon talks that tend to be very kind of hands-on. I'm going to walk you through a module or do code reviews. That's not what this is about today. And I will emphasize again, this is really geared towards beginners. But when I say beginners, really anybody, whether you're a developer, do front-end work, whether you're currently doing DevOps, or even on the management side. So let me give you a bit of my background. I have been on Drupal.org, I just checked this week, for 13 years. Started with Drupal 5, so I have seen all the evolutions, seen all the change, I've seen a lot go on in that time. I spent about 3 years as a freelance Drupal developer with my own company here in Atlanta, and kind of did a lot of stuff on my own for a number of years. After that, I worked for Manhattan Associates and managed all their corporate websites. Did that for 8 years. And when I say manage the corporate websites, I mean everything. I did back-end development, front-end. I managed our vendor relationship with MediaCurrent, managed our relationship with Pantheon on the hosting side, had to do all the program management internally. In 2015, I launched one of the very first corporate multilingual D8 sites. We actually launched and went live when Drupal 8 was in beta 6. That is a lot of risk and a lot of, not an easy thing to do, but we did it and it was great. I am currently working for SEI, which is a business and technology consulting firm. We have 8 offices around the country. So we help companies with agile transformation, change management, DevOps, technology execution. So what are we talking about today? I kind of brought up this idea of, Drupal it's not for experts. And I really like this quote. An expert is a man who's made all the mistakes which can be made in a narrow field. Okay, I really like that, and I can relate to it, because I've made all the mistakes, I promise you, from day one. Okay, and what are those sort of mistakes? You hear when you get into the Drupal community, don't hack core. Yeah, I've done that. Okay, don't go hack a contrib module and go off on your own. Yeah, I've done that. I've made mistakes such as, why don't I try to deploy these updates to a live production site during the middle of the day? Yeah, I've done that too. I've accidentally deleted an entire site database and have to have my hosting company provide me with backups. Okay, so I've made all the mistakes. Everybody has to start somewhere. But over time, you learn a lot from those mistakes. So as I was doing freelance work, I started making various rules for myself of, okay, I'm not going to get burned by that mistake again. One of them was, don't ever host on GoDaddy. I don't think there's any GoDaddy employees here. That was one. Number 2, I learned, even when the client demands and insists, don't go host on a Windows server. That's just trouble. Why do that? Okay, so I developed various rules over the years around avoiding mistakes, but I've made plenty of them. And I'm not saying I'm an expert, but I think I'm finally getting closer, having made a lot of the mistakes. So one of the mistakes I made early on, and I think this is a common thing when someone gets started in development and technology, I had this vision of what the flow of web development was. Okay, I'm going to sit down with my client and we're going to talk through requirements, and I'm going to write up this great proposal that includes all the requirements. Then I'm going to go and do maybe some design work, provide some wireframes, do some architecture work to kind of like, what is this going to look like? And then I'm going to start building. I'm going to build the site, hopefully do some testing, right? And then I'm going to deploy. Anybody see a problem with this? Yeah, there's probably a lot of problems, right? So the first question I ask myself now when I look at it, I'm like, wait, how many deploys? This just shows one. okay? It doesn't take long to know, no, that is not reality, okay? This is closer to reality, okay? Does this look more familiar? Just constant iteration, okay? Constant iteration back and forth. There's no, you don't go say, I'm going to go stand up this website and, I mean, I guess there's people who do it, but no, it's an ever-evolving thing. So this is more the picture of what we see. And this actually, I'm going to talk a lot today about agile principles, DevOps, but this is the pattern, okay? We see this pattern time and time again of plan, build, continuous integration, deploy, operate, continuous feedback, and back again, and deploy. And it got to, I mean, there were times a few years ago at Manhattan Associates, I look at this deploy, I might do 10 deploys in a day, okay, for certain small little features that might have gone on to one particular language website, okay? So what is DevOps? You know, people throw out this term, you know, people think, oh, it's these tools, it's a certain methodology. It's all of that. But I like this quote because it starts to get at the root of what DevOps is. It is not the most intellectual of the species that survives. It is not the strongest that survives. But the species that survives is the one that is able best to adapt and adjust to changing environment in which it finds itself. Now, interestingly enough, this quote actually gets attributed to Charles Darwin all the time, and it's not. If you actually go search this, you'll find Charles Darwin. It was actually a business professor named Leon Megginson, but I think he's really onto something here, this idea of change. Okay, and I think that probably everybody in this room has been in situations where you're in positions of constant change. Sure, we'd like to, you know, this picture I had of this nice, easy flow, that's not reality. We know it's constant change. We know businesses might change on a dime, and it may not make sense, but we have to accommodate and be ready for change. So, once again, what is DevOps? DevOps is the practice of operations and development engineers participating together in the entire service lifecycle, from design through the development process to production support. I like that. It's kind of a succinct statement, but let's unpack that and talk about what all's involved. You know, so I talked a minute ago, some people think of it as purely, well, that's the tool I use, or, oh, we've got a DevOps guy. He handles DevOps. Okay? Or, no, it's just kind of these ideals. It's all of that. It's every bit of it. So, DevOps values. I was actually in a earlier talk, Jason Want was talking about, you know, kind of a contrib first approach, and he talked through the agile values. This is on the DrupalCamp website, and this is actually linked. The DevOps values are very similar to the agile values. Okay, this idea of people before processes. Okay, same thing with principles. There are various principles, and the DevOps principles are almost identical to the Agile principles. DevOps methods. Okay, so DevOps methods might be ways of implementing those values and principles. It might be extreme programming. It might be Scrum. It might be some other method, okay? But there's various methods that are involved in DevOps. DevOps practices. So what are practices? You know, that might be continuous integration, continuous deployment, configuration management, okay? Then we have tools. You know, once again, this is kind of where people get stuck and think, oh, it's about the tools. It's about, I'm going to have Jenkins over here, and I've got a Circle CI. I've got Vagrant or Docker for my local development environment, some sort of tool. It's all of this. Okay? That's what DevOps is. It's all of this. So I remember when I first started hearing about DevOps, that I had these kind of perceptions versus reality, things that I thought about DevOps. And this really started a lot when I was working on my own, just by myself. I think I have limited time. I've got to build this site. but I think this works anywhere. And I think in some regards, sometimes we can get in larger companies and larger organizations where sometimes we get siloed and like, well, that's not me, or there's various issues. So what are some of these perceptions that we may have around DevOps? That's just for large development shops. That's how I thought, Sometimes that, even at times I was partnering with a couple other people. I'm like, that's a thing for big development shops. In reality, the smaller your organization, the more you're going to benefit from DevOps. Okay, I know looking back that I wish that I had started incorporating a lot of these ideas and methods and tools early on. It would have saved me a lot of headache and a lot of time. It takes too much time. And that's the reality of it, right? When I was working as a freelancer, there's X amount of time in the day times 2, right? And I think I don't have time to go do this other stuff. The reality is it will save you time. Okay? It's about an investment in your time. Guess what? We invest in a laptop, we invest in maybe a hosting contract. DevOps is the same thing. It's all around kind of investing your time in something that is going to pay off down the road. Okay? Overly complicated. For me, I've done a lot of things in my career that weren't necessarily development related. So when I got into doing Drupal development, I'm hearing this DevOps stuff. I'm like, whoa, that's maybe someday. Okay. The reality is that it will actually streamline your business and help you better understand what it is you're doing without being overly complicated. It actually simplifies things. Just for experts. Okay, I've been to, I think, 10 plus DrupalCons, and I've sat in on some DevOps, and usually all the DevOps talks over the years have been in the advanced track. So I'm thinking, oh man, I better have written a bunch of modules and done all these core contrib stuff. I'm not ready for that. It's not just for experts, okay? Even beginners can benefit. Even when you're starting, if you were starting right now doing Drupal work, you can benefit with using DevOps. So I always talk about this idea of needing a plan. I play on a soccer team, and the guys I both play and coach, and I'm always talking to my players about it doesn't have to be my way. We just have to have a way. So anytime I get into this idea of either managing a website, developing, I always think about a plan. But life doesn't always cooperate with our plans, right? And I really like this quote from Mike Tyson. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Okay, and I can promise you, over the years doing Drupal work, I've gotten punched in the mouth by some Mike Tysons. Okay, what were those? Does anybody in the room know what DrupalCamp is? Anybody else? This was, I'm thinking 2015.
Oh, I was thinking of the one last year.
That was,
Okay, that's the one you got.
yes, that was Return of DrupalCamp. That was the sequel. DrupalCamp, the original one, security hole. And I recall at the time, I think most people were given maybe a couple days notice that, hey, by the way, this exploit is out there. We're giving you a couple days notice, but man, when this thing hits, you were going to have to patch immediately. Well, the great timing of this is that I was on a trip in Europe at the time and had no access to my email. So I roll back into town on a Sunday night to find this and realizing, well, some other people might have had 2 or 3 days. I had basically 12 hours. And it wasn't just one site. I had dozens of sites that I was going to have to patch. Okay? That's a Mike Tyson punching you in the mouth. Okay? That is, how do I plan for that? How can I prepare myself? And we think, these are once in a lifetime. She just said, that one just happened, right? The sequel. There will be a third. Trust me, there will be. GDPR. Right? There's another thing that a couple years ago, it was rumored we knew that we were going to have to do something on it. People thought, well, I'm not in Europe. Am I going to really have to do that? So about 2 years ago, in the spring, some of the people in legal at my company say, hey, by the way, we're going to have you guys do some implementation on some of these sites, and you have 60 days. That's a big change. That's something you have to be ready for. How do you react? Remember the quote a minute ago about this ability to react to change. New corporate brand.
That GDPR stands for what?
What does GDPR even stand for? GDPR is a European Union law around user privacy and consent. So we're now seeing this in the United States with the new California law, and there's going to be more. While Manhattan Associates, where I was working at the time, was, headquartered here, we had websites in Europe. Yeah. So big legal requirement, and you're seeing, companies are starting to get sued for non-compliance. So it's a big deal. In particular, legal department comes in and said, you got 60 days? Well, forget all the other plans, right?
So you have to be able to scrub your users' content, all their personal data, on critical line.
And not just, we think of, a number of years ago, this idea of kind of cookie and consent. You'd go to sites and it was like, well, we're just assuming consent so long as you say otherwise. Well, the new laws with GDPR was no, it's a double opt-in. They have to, if they don't consent immediately, then assume that you can't collect any data and you can't place cookies. Okay? New corporate brand. So I was actually talking with some of my friends from Media Current. We were working on this project a couple of years ago. I was working on delivering a conference website, and all of a sudden I was told, we've got to implement a new corporate brand on our website. This was at the beginning of November, and you have till the middle of January to have this done for all of the corporate websites. Punch in the mouth, right? How do we respond to change? New hosting company. I moved a whole set of corporate websites. I had 30 days to move to Pantheon. How do you respond to change when you get punched in the mouth? And do you have a plan? Everybody says they have a plan, but it's got to account for the big ones. What are we talking about? Just what's the normal stuff? What does it look like? What are just common scenarios? And these happen all the time. How do I quickly apply security updates? I mean, we all know, for those that are getting into Drupal, whether you're a beginner, if you're a beginner, trust me, you'll get these emails, every so often, hey, there's a security update. And, for me, it's okay, what are my modules do I have to look out for? Is this core? Okay, that's a pretty standard occurrence. And guess what? It's fine if you have one site. What if you have 200 sites? Can I quickly deploy new features? Maybe it's just hey, we've got this new Google tag we've got to do. We've got to update some stuff in Google Tag Manager. Got to make a couple configuration changes. I got to deploy this out, and I got to do it now. How can I quickly and reliably install, test, and deploy module updates? So, hey, there's a new update to a module, but we've been waiting on this feature. How do I do that quickly? How can I test new theme updates? This will happen all the time. You have somebody decide, we don't like this font. We're going to, as a corporate brand, we're going to move to this font. Okay, how can I do that? How can I make sure it's tested? How can I make sure, browser testing is getting a little easier. I mean, Internet Explorer is not quite a thing anymore, is it? Yeah, I know. It's still better than dealing with Internet Explorer 8, 9, 10, etc. How can I get add new developers to my team and get them up to speed quickly? This will happen if you're working at a company and you're adding new people, if you're working in an agency bringing people in, or in my case, I'm working with an agency, they'd bring people in, we'd bring people in, they'd have new people that had been with them that move on to our project. So how do you do that? How do you manage that sort of change? So let's talk about, migrate new site to a new hosting provider. These are not unusual. I talked about the big ones, but this is kind of the day-to-day sort of stuff to do, okay? And it can be really time consuming. So let's talk about kind of what are DevOps practice areas, okay? So, I mentioned earlier this idea that sometimes, I've heard people say, oh, I'm the DevOps guy, okay? DevOps kind of covers a number of different areas. So let's talk about some of these areas. So first one here, this is, infrastructure automation. What are we talking about? We're talking about systems, OS configs, app deployment as code, okay? Things like, I've got a Docker container so that I can, on my local dev, have the exact same environment as when I push it up to my hosting provider. Okay, it's not enough just to have MAMP running on your local machine. Okay, you want to be able to do the exact same thing. And, in the past, you'd have, some systems engineers that would help you with setting up a server over here to do that. Okay? Continuous delivery. Build, test, deploy your apps in a fast and automated manner. Okay? Websites, web applications, they are not static things. They change all the time. They have a lifespan. Okay? I heard someone in an earlier talk about asking client kind of how long they envisioned, the lifespan, and he was thinking, I don't know, it might be five to 10 years. And they're like, as long as we need it. They last a long time. And it might be, okay, we're going to re-platform and now we're going to migrate to Drupal 9, 10, etc. But it's that continuous delivery. Site reliability engineering, monitoring, orchestration. Oh, we've got to now spin up a new language version, okay? We want to monitor new traffic coming through, okay? So DevOps covers all of these areas. So let's talk about, at SCI, we talk a lot about kind of maturity model in various areas. And I want to walk you guys through this Drupal DevOps maturity model. And I can tell you, I'm going to show you the first one. I started way back over here, all right? And no matter where we start on this model that I'm going to show you, there's always room for, okay, where do I go the next step? Where's the next step? Okay? So, level one, initial, and honestly, the initial probably should be the next one, but this is, if you're just starting at the beginning, manual deployment. That's how, back in the day in Drupal 5, you'd download that zip file, uncompress it on your machine, get things going, FTP it up to the hosting provider. Maybe you might do an rsync at some point, okay? No version control. And sometimes we think, well, who's not doing version control? I was in a meeting at a large company a few weeks ago talking about DevOps, and a new consultant came in saying, hey, I was talking to somebody and they're not using any version control. Exactly. All right? But hey, we've all been there. We've all been there. No automated processes. Everything manual. Okay? No database or file backups. No testing. Okay? I've done a lot of websites under this model, okay? I suspect everybody in this room that's ever built a Drupal site has probably done this, maybe the first one, maybe testing, and that's okay. But this is initial. This is where we start. So, where do we move next? What's level 2? Okay? These are, how do we start making things repeatable? Okay? And that's a real key, repeatable. I mean, it's not really an option anymore. I mean, technically you can, but you start with Composer, okay? Every install of Drupal, every update of contrib modules, Composer, okay? So you start using that. So it's a consistent way every time, okay? Git repository, that, and I would say, while this is initial, this is like, this, you have to minimum start here. So Git repository, okay? Do that, set up a Bitbucket account, set up a GitHub account, have all your repos there, okay? A local development environment. Same thing, I remember back in the day when I first got started, I had a hosting account and I would just develop on the site. Just worked easy. I'd get the site up and start monkeying around with configuration on there. But you need a local development environment. Okay. Automation scripts, and I'm talking just basics, like write a bash script that at minimum that says, okay, once I have a commit, then I'm going to run a bash script that's going to then push my repo up. It's going to run an rsync and push my files up to my server and hopefully a QA server, that sort of thing. Okay, so this is kind of where at minimum where we want to start. Okay, where do we go next? So I call this defined. So this is kind of a defined DevOps process. Standardized local development environment. So what do I mean by standardized? I mean have a Docker container, have some standard way that, and the way I think of it is, if my laptop gets run over or stolen, do I have a way to pull down some sort of containerized version or something that is my local dev that I can get started with right away? Okay? Because I promise you, it will happen. It's happened to me. The Drupal install profile. Okay? When you start working with, I remember when I first started working with Drupal, I had certain favorite modules, and it got to where I'm like, okay, every single site I build, I'm going to have these. Well, create an install profile so that you can just, and it's a little bit like, it's like your own personal distribution. Okay, some of you guys may have seen Media Current's been showing their rain. That's what they're doing. Okay, they've got a standard install profile that when they begin an engagement with a client, they're going to start with that. And so it speeds up the process. They're ready to go. Production, dev, test environments. Okay? You got to have a minimum of those three. There's no getting around that. You have to be able to do that. You've got to be able to, I remember when I first started working on some small sites, I'd have a client, before I was ready to launch it, the client said, well, can I see it? And I'm thinking, oh, I guess I'll bring my laptop over. No, you want a test environment that's password protected, that you can give clients access to say, here's what this is going to look like when we go live. No one else can get to it. Google's not indexing it. We need to be able to see it. We need a place where I can QA it. Okay? Git workflow. So it's not just enough to have a Git repository. You need some sort of automation around it that provides some workflow so that if you're working with multiple developers, how do you not get all on top of each other? Do you have a pull request process? When a pull request is approved, have some sort of automated merge and deploy automatically. Okay, so you want some automation there. Okay, these things, once again, remember I said at the beginning, it's an investment of time, but it pays off, because you get into these situations I talked about earlier. You want to be able to do these things quickly. So, level 3, defined. Level 4, managed. Okay, now we're, once again, nothing here is rocket science. Okay? And so when I talk about, I like this term maturity. Okay? Notice it's not sophistication per se. It's, okay, I'm gaining experience. None of these are super tricky. Modern hosting platform optimized for DevOps. Now, not always possible, but when you can, it is the way to go. Okay, so I remember years ago, I had some sites that I was hosting on Rackspace. I had some on a company called Site5. Just standard cPanel. Just moved to Pantheon about, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago when I started using Pantheon. Massive difference. Having the tools and a hosting setup that is geared towards DevOps. Okay, Acquia has similar tools as well. Okay, so I encourage you, as you're, if you're in a place to grow in your business, or you're within a company and you're currently on some just standard hosting platform, there's a lot of benefit to being on a modern hosting platform that is geared towards DevOps. Feature branch environments. This is actually one of my favorite things from Pantheon. Okay, so what a feature branch environment is, well, let's say I'm gonna do some, this brand work I talked about where I had to do a bunch of front end work, new typography, new color palette for our site. So I created a Git branch for that. Well, the great thing is that Pantheon lets you create a new environment for every feature branch you create in Git. Okay, so I'm able to roll that right up, got a name for it, I can copy it over my production database, all my files, and start showing all of my stakeholders, here's what the site's gonna look like, okay? Before I've even gotten to testing or anything, okay? So that's a big deal. Configuration management. I still remember the days before there was any configuration management in Drupal, okay? Prior to Drupal 8, I mean, there were some things out there where you could do it, but that's a bit, and so what am I talking about? Configuration management. And I always think about, you want your site configuration, if you go in the back-end UI and you got all the little check boxes, none of that clickety-clickety. That's what I call that, right? Once again, back in the day, I'd do that and then think, oh, wait, did I click no, you want that in code. You want it in code and you want it in your Git repo, all right? So that it's repeatable, so that if you find a problem, you can roll it back easily, okay? So configuration management, not super tricky, but it's a big deal and will really help you in all these things we're talking about. Responding to change quickly. So finally, optimize. What does optimized DevOps look like? So what do we then what's the last bit here? Okay, continuous integration. Okay, the ability, and I'm talking using things like Jenkins, like Circle CI, so that I can say, I've got this new feature, made a new custom module here, and I want to quickly run a build script that's going to create a new build artifact, and I'm going to push this up into a multi-dev. It's going to run automated tests. Okay, continuous integration and continuous deployment. Okay, you want to be able to respond to changes so that, I've seen times where I think a security update would come out, and then I think this is right, later in that day we got some word, oh, there's actually another bit to it. You got to make another change. Okay, so the ability to continually integrate, continually deploy, automated functionality tests. Okay, it's great to do things like, I talked earlier about some of these kind of methods and principles, and there's things like extreme programming and pair programming. I'm a big fan of pair programming. Okay, 4 eyes are better than 2, right? But nothing can, automated functionality tests are huge. So use BHAT. Okay. Visual regression test. I don't actually see, it's funny, how little I see that done. But particularly if you're doing front-end work, you definitely want visual regression test, and it's not hard to do. It really isn't. So let's go through a scenario here. Let's talk about module security patch, and I want to walk you guys through what does this look like if we're not using DevOps? And then we'll talk about, what does this look like with DevOps? Tools, methods, principles, everything. So in a no DevOps scenario, download the module and copy over old version. Yes, I've done that. Push code to server via FTP or rsync. Yeah, you can do that. Run your database update on the server. On the live server. Check available updates, go into the UI, confirm that module's been updated. All right? I remember the first time I did that. Then cross your fingers. Okay? Been there? Start over again because you forgot a dependency on a different module. Okay? Done that before, for sure. Oh, you shouldn't update views to this version because it has a dependency on this other module. So start over. and repeat and repeat. Okay? That is what this looks like. And I've been there, and I've had nights where I'm up at 3 or 4 in the morning thinking, good grief, this should not take me this long. I thought Drupal was a sophisticated CMS. Repeat. So what does this look like using DevOps practices and tools? Okay? Create a new Git feature branch. I'm going to start right there. I've got my master branch. I'm pulling down my latest, and I'm going to create a new feature branch for this change. Okay? I'm going to update my module with Composer. And by the way, I'm probably going to go read some of the documentation on d.org to see, are there any other dependencies? Do I need to make sure? Okay? And do your run Composer update with dependencies. Create a new Git commit. Run a build and deploy script. What might that build and deploy script do? I'm going to create a new site build. I'm going to run bhat tests. I'm going to deploy my site build on a multi-dev environment or maybe in a local container for some testing. Pull production database files into that environment. Run my database update and confirm. Okay? All with my deploy script. Okay? A bhat test is a functionality test. So you can pick any number of things, and it's often going to be around, it might be focused on a particular module to say, does this functionality occur? Bhat is it is a framework to create any number of tests. So depending upon your site and your use case, you'll need to sit and think, okay, what really matters to my site? So I'll give you a great example. On the previous corporate sites I worked on, we had one thing that no matter what happened to that website had to work, and it was the contact us form. And I know that may sound crazy, but that was the thing. The contact us form, okay? Because the website was primarily, we want to get leads. And if that's broken or there's a problem, I'm getting calls from the C-suite.
So why is it called bhat? Is that a framework or something?
Yeah, it's the name of the tool.
Behavioral test.
Yeah. I'm going to now push my feature branch to a remote repo to begin my workflow and kick off some more processes. I'm going to run another build deploy script, create new site build, run my bhat test again, deploy site build on dev environment, pull production, and so forth. Okay? Now what's interesting about this, and I actually could have gone further. I ran out of space and I thought I'm going to stop there. Okay? And you think, well, in some regards, this is simpler. This over here is way quicker. I can promise you. A lot more steps. There's more thought that goes into it. That's right. That's right. So what does this look like? Okay? No DevOps. Too slow. Okay? I've been there. Really, FTP. The worst part, I've been in, I remember times, and this is probably 10 plus years ago, copying files up and all of a sudden something goes wrong with my connection and I'm like, I guess I got to do the whole thing over again, right? Too easy to make mistakes. And that's a big part of DevOps is, part of the automation is reducing the places for error, okay? There's just too many places you can make mistakes there. It's not scalable, okay? You might be able to do that on 5 sites, maybe 10, maybe, but it's not scalable. It's not easily repeatable. So say I'm like, okay, now I got to go do another, I'm just starting from scratch again. If I don't have any processes, any tools, any methods that say, here's how I do this, it's like playing a sport. It becomes muscle memory, okay? And what's great about muscle memory is that then you can dedicate your thoughts to what are the specific business problems you're trying to solve rather than this thing that, how do I update a Drupal module? Okay, not transferable, okay? So I got a funny story. So when I was doing freelance development, I went to work for Manhattan Associates, and a friend of mine who's speaking here today, Paul McKibben, Paul had recently come on board with MediaCurrent at the time, and he'd been doing some freelance work with a marketing firm here in Atlanta. And so when he left, somebody said, hey, they need somebody to do work, and it was fine for me to do some work on the side with Manhattan Associates. So I started doing more sites on the side in addition to my day job. You know, I'm kind of a 4 or 5 hour a night sleep sort of guy. Started doing on the side. Well, took a new job this past year, and I'm like, I don't have time for this. Paul has left Media Current. Well, we've got processes there. I'm going to transfer this right back to Paul to go. Transferable matters. You know, you get hit by a bus. Can somebody come and step in and start doing the work? So DevOps practices and tools, it's fast. Automated to decrease or eliminate mistakes. Scalable for multiple sites or developers. Repeatable. Transferable, platform, version, developer agnostic. Okay? That is what you want. So to tell you where this can really go, so I'm working on a project at a large Fortune 500 company here in town, and we're doing a lot of AWS work. And so what's interesting is not only is the application itself completely serverless and all in code, but even all of the DevOps processes and tools, our CI/CD process, is all in code. Everything. Okay, so we can spin it all up, we can tear it down and go create a new instance over here, and it's all configuration driven. So we'll just have one configuration file, fill out a few of the changes, and spin up that whole environment. Okay, that is the promise of DevOps. Okay, it's not rocket science. Okay, it's about being agile, about being able to respond to change quickly, about making things repeatable, and about doing it well. Any questions?
So it feels like in your little maturity scale, as you do move up that chain, it does start taking more expertise, as you say. Is there, are there, this is like a Drupal Composer project, right? So you install Composer, you call the project, boom, you got to work in Drupal, install pretty quickly, right? Is there a similar kind of thing that can, you know, let's say I want a CI/CD with, you know, that I can just click download or get install or npm install, basically add my configuration and I can go with it.
Yeah. So what I would say is that there's a lot of tools out there, and none of them are terribly difficult. So the real answer is the community, and so part of what drew me to Drupal in the first place is the community, and there's people out there that shockingly will spend a chunk of time with you of their own time helping you with these things. So just that sort of thing. So you may say, okay, I want to get some of this, I want to get some, you know, maybe I want to set up a Jenkins server to do this. Where do I even begin? Okay, so when I ran into things like that, I would start going on d.org, and I might start asking questions, and shockingly, I found people say, hey, I'll just send you all this documentation of how we set our stuff up. And that's part of what this community is about. And I've found over 13 years that there's a willingness to give back to others, because we've all been, I mean, you know, probably in this room, we've got all sorts of levels of experience here in this community. So if you're new to the community, what I would say is lean into it, and that's what we're about. So that, you know, it's not a, hey, here's this link to go get, or here's a specific tool, but because there's a lot of different ways to do it, but people in this community will help you get there. I like the hat, by the way. Any other questions? I don't think anybody fell asleep. It's late afternoon.
So, um,
experience with CP is that managers say they change and preserving the production data, storing the production data back into the production. These are the things that systems say more about attention to.
Yeah.
You got to
Good open source tools
There is a module I can look. So it's this idea of staging content, right? Okay. So there are, so first of all, there's some things that we can do around, workflow to where we can put stuff into draft. But sometimes there's things that I want to go beyond that and really stage content. So my understanding there, I think there's maybe a module or two out there that would kind of help you stage content on like a test or QA server and then say, I'm going to deploy content. But you're right. I mean, I think that's probably one of the bigger challenges around continuous deployment is the actual content in the database. I didn't ask this earlier. Give me an idea of where we are in this room. Beginner, intermediate, advanced. Tell me where you guys are.
I'd say I'm a 3 or 4.
Scale up left.
5.
Oh, okay.
Oh, he's using his maturity.
Oh, okay.
Is
I've got the maturity to a 3 or 4.
is this helpful to kind of?
Yes.
I think it's really good to kind of it says here's where there's always room for improvement. Okay, it's
4 pretty easily, but it's when you get 5 that I guess we don't go that far.
yeah.
I'm further along on this scale on non-Drupal projects than I am on Drupal projects.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear more about the visual regression. Are you screenshotting things and having a human look at it?
Absolutely. Yeah, you won't. There's some good tools out there. Yeah, there's cloud services for it. I've run some locally with my local dev environments. That'll just go through a site, and I can put configuration in and say I want to do these different sites and these browsers and these sizes, everything. Go run, kick that off, and then I often will turn it over to a designer or somebody, go through and review these and test them now. But the fact that I can also just get a huge amount of particularly either the critical pages on my site or the ones where I know we've made changes to kind of say, okay, show me the before and after.
But you're putting human eyes on the screenshot.
Oh yeah. You have to when you're talking theming sort of stuff and the design. You just have, you can't really write an automated test for that.
Oh, okay. I'd say we're probably at about a 5. I'm at Warner, so we, have all
Awesome.
we have a bunch of people, but we do the continuous integration. We have a QA, we have QA people, so they actually run the site before we'll push it up. Definitely the automated tests. We do VHAT tests. We also write unit tests and kernel tests and functional tests. As much stuff in PHP as you can, then we leave the VHAT stuff more for what user interactions should be. Right here. Like stuff really easy. What's that? It's in PHP. But what you do with VHAT is you write behaviors. So you say, when I do this is what I expect to see. And then you code that out in PHP. So you can really emulate what a user is actually doing.
Yeah. So here's a question, and you guys may be doing it all right. I do sometimes larger companies say, oh, we got the DevOps crew does that. So my question is, do you guys have DevOps people, or is there a DevOps mentality?
We have a DevOps guy. But there's definitely the mentality of it. We're expected as a developer, like my job basically is to write modules. So that's basically how I spend my day. But if I write a module, anything that I can write a unit test or kernel test for, I'm expected to do that. Some VHAT, we've got some of the QA, I think we're trying to push it up to where the QA people will write the VHAT test. tests as we're trying to get them a little more automated. But, we write tests like crazy. I mean, half of the module development is actually writing the tests for it.
Of course.
We don't do test driven. There's a lot of times when I think that about 3/4 of the way through, I'm thinking, why didn't I start this with a BHAG test?
Yeah.
And because there's the days where you're sitting there doing the same page, running the same form like 200 times and filling out this form and hitting enter. Oh, fill it out again, hit enter. And
Yeah.
so it can really save.
But I think that's good because
But kernel, the very basic unit test will test little bits of code. You don't need a database or anything like that. You can just test the little bit of code works. Above that is a kernel test, where with the kernel test you actually get a functional Drupal instance behind the test, so you can pull stuff from the database and write stuff from the database. And then up a little bit above that is functional tests. I can't remember the distinctions. And then above that is BPAC.
All right. Thank you all very much. If you have any further questions, I'm around.